I had this encounter with a kid who guided us when we got lost on a mountain hike some time ago. So, the story goes when we were night trekking in one of the mountains in Laguna. We were at the footside of the mountain by 10 in the evening. We started trekking and followed the mountain trail. It was dark and slightly raining that time and only had our flashlights with us. In that hike, three of us were the lead hikers, me and two of my friends. After 30 minutes of trekking, my two friend lead hikers noticed we were getting lost on the trail. We still continued walking until we saw a kid along the way. He had a candle with him and looked rugged and dirty. He asked us, "Are you lost?" To which we responded, "Yes, I feel we are getting lost right now. The trail seemed different." We asked if the kid knew the way, and he said yes, then went to show us the directions. He said to take a different route and strictly implied that we do not go back the trail we just passed. We were 19 hikers that time. The other 16 hikers were several meters away from us. By 12 midnight, all of us hikers were at the campsite. In my mind, I thank the kid for teaching us the right direction. So, here's the catch. I asked the other 16 hikers if they saw the kid we talked to earlier. They responded no. They were also confused why us lead hikers stopped in the middle of the trail and looked like we were talking to someone else beside us three. I was confused. They were supposed to see the child, and it was definitely a straight trail. They never saw that kid.
This happened last year in my wife's province in Bicol. We woke up early to attend a mass in a nearby town. We were up by 3 a.m. So I went outside to stretch a bit and alleviate the sleepiness. Outside, I saw my wife's uncle sitting by the window in their own backyard. I greeted him, then nodded to the other person beside him. After that, we prepared for the mass and went on the day as usual. Later that day, I saw her uncle again and was curious to ask, "Who was the one sitting beside you earlier?" He responded, "Who? I was the only one sitting there earlier." The response sent shivers down my spine. I told him he was sitting beside a teenage boy, which I also greeted after him. He told me his son had died 8 years ago, and also mentioned it still visits them every now and then. To this day, I have no idea why his spirit appealed to me.
This happened when I was 16 years old. We were down spending the night at the home of one of our friends. I had two friends with me, another female friend and her suitor. As our storytelling session progressed, she claimed that her sister had been seeing a white lady appearing in Alabang Bridge near the direction towards Kupang. So what we did was ignored her, given we were scaredy cats. It was 10 p.m. as we were inside a jeepney on our way home. We passed by a bridge near our friend's house. At the end of the passenger seat, we saw a woman nodded in trance. It looked to us that she was raped, her hair wildly messed up, her clothes torn and dirty, her skin lined up with bruises everywhere. After noticing the lone passenger at the back, I look at the driver in fear. The weird thing is, the driver didn't seem to notice that he had a passenger at the back. After looking at the driver, we went back to take a glance at the lady passenger at the back. She was already gone. After reaching her house, my friend sprinted outwards in fear. I instantly followed her and never looked back at the jeepney. I've had several experiences with ghosts since I was young. I grew up as an altar kid in one of the churches in Alabang. I also had several horrifying experiences. At first, being a kid, I was always scared. But as I grew up, it became a normal thing to me. I just trust and put my faith in God, and you'll fear nothing. This story is one of those horrifying experiences that happened to me. One evening in September 2001, I was sleeping in my room. There were two beds. The other bed is where my brother sleeps. That midnight, I woke up and saw a shadow from where my foot was. My father had already passed away, and I tried to communicate with him. "Are you my father?" I received no response, and so I let it by. After a minute, I felt the shadow pull my soul from my feet. I really felt it was my soul because when I saw my feet, it was still straight, and I had a feeling someone was holding them tight. It felt like a test of faith, and so I prayed. Then after a few seconds, the shadow disappeared. That wasn't the last time. After a week, I sought help from the stepfather of a friend, who happened to be a faith healer. I was bewildered because as soon as he stepped foot in our house, he immediately knew someone or something was bothering me there. Note that I haven't told him about the shadow yet. So he proceeded to perform a ritual, then placed my feet in a chair while I'm being held by two of my friends. He inserted a piece of metal between my toes. He asked, "What is your name?" To which I responded with my actual name. After that, he tapped my feet, from which I felt a burning sensation inside me. It felt like someone had entered my body. The scary thing is, when it started, I had no control of my mouth when another voice was seemingly talking out of it. It felt like the spirit of a woman was inside my body. And even scarier was when I was mentally aware of what was happening. I wasn't even passing out and was fully conscious throughout the ordeal. I can hear the questions of the faith healer and the responses of the woman spirit in me. I can even feel the agony and hardships she had gone through while the faith healer was asking why was she tormenting me. While still within me, I asked her internally if she was the same one who appeared that night and pulled my feet, and she said that it wasn't her. She was only around that time and was forced to enter my body because of the rituals of the faith healer. I believe the power of that faith healer didn't come from God. Right after the session, he sold me an incantation worth 500 pesos. He thought I believed in him, but I knew better since I was conscious and was able to talk to the spirit directly. But the weird thing is, I was heavily exhausted after. I felt fragile, powerless, and weak for a few hours. Mount Banahaw, late 90s, was the last time we hiked with my friends. We only do seasonal hikes usually in the summer. We've been hearing a few eerie stories, but most of them happened in Mount Cristobal. Rumors were about hikers losing their way or going in circles despite being familiar with the trails. There were even theories about locals instilling fear to hikers to keep them away from their mountain crops. Mount Banahaw, Easter Sunday, when we were pushing the mountain assault halfway. We were expecting to reach the peak in 2 hours max and arrive by 3 p.m. In front of us was foot traffic. There was a group of elderly pilgrims led by some women in front. One of the elders had difficulty walking. Feels like they're on a suicide, I said to myself. We didn't trail past them or leave them off in the distance as a sign of goodwill, and just in case our help was needed. Then came a sudden rain. We're screwed, I said. I feared hypothermia given it was already getting dark and we were still way off the peak, not to mention there was no place to camp around. We reached the peak at 7 in the evening, drenched in wet clothes and freezing. We were having difficulties finding a suitable campsite due to the darkness. Luckily enough, we got a vacant spot where our 2 tents would fit. So we set up camp, then changed clothes. It was still raining, so we weren't really getting out of the tent. It was around 10 p.m. when the rain had stopped, and we heard footsteps of people running outside the tent where our heads were leaning to. I said, "Those people still have the energy." After that, we just drank a few beers to subdue the chill of the night. The morning after, we went out of the tents to explore, greeting other groups around the camp. One of the guys we greeted said, "The plane crash site is just below from where we are right now. If you want, I can guide you there." We trailed with him, and in less than 5 minutes, we were already at the crash site. We've been hearing rumors about the crash site at the peak of Banahaw, but we haven't seen it even once. On that track, we saw the whole plane. The fuselage was visibly missing already, but you can tell that it was the wreckage of a whole airplane, and it felt like the plane was more than 30 years old already at the site. So we decided to take pictures in amazement and headed back to camp. I researched about the plane crash and found a record pertaining to a DC-3 plane crashing on the summit of Mount Banahaw in December 1946. 12 of the 14 people aboard died. Apparently, it struck the treetops and got entangled, crashing to the mountain at 2,650 meters above sea level.
This was a story told by a close relative. She said she had been having dreams on the same date every 3 to 4 years. So she made sure her mommy was there for that moment every time. In her dreams, a small man is standing by her room's window. This little man held a string tied to his body, which she believed was to her soul, and it was slowly being pulled out of her body. The last time she dreamt about it, she saw that almost half of her soul had already been pulled out of her body. Then she got awakened by her mother because of her moaning. I had an auntie who was the youngest sibling of my father. They returned to town after a barrio fiesta. One day, she was about to take a bath around noon when she saw that there was still someone inside, so she decided to wait. 30 minutes had passed and there was still no one going out of the bathroom. So she decided to look again if there was still someone inside. To her surprise, the door was opened and in front of her was a pail still full of water. So she decided to just go on with her bath and prepare for the festivities later that night. After a few days, she left for Bacolod. Upon arriving there, she had several skin lumps appearing throughout her body. Several doctors had already tended, but no one was able to cure her. So they decided to seek an albularyo near them. When they arrived, the albularyo said, "You used the water owned by the spirits residing in your house. They wanted to take a bath too, but you used their water, so they get mad at you." After a few incantations, an enchanted oil applied to her body, they left the albularyo's house. When they arrived home, her skin slowly went back to normal. I had another aunt who is still in Italy now. When she was young, she too was a victim of the entities in our house in the province. She says it was a hot, humid noon at day, and so she decided to take a bath. After taking a bath, she went upstairs and was combing her hair by the dresser near the window. She mentioned she was even singing while combing. Suddenly, the window curtain covered the mirror that she was looking at. As if gusted by the wind outside, she felt a bit agitated and said, "What nuisance this wind is." So she removed the curtain and let it fall again from the windows. A few seconds later, the curtain did it again. Now, really agitated, she put out some curse words in frustration. To her surprise, the curtain swayed in front of the mirror as if someone was waving it. She held the curtain in her hands and forcefully pushed it out of the window. But then chills coursed through her body when she felt as if she held a hand, even though there was no one there. She screamed in fear and sprinted back to the first floor of our house. She was so scared that she staggered down the stairs and left the house immediately, all but in a bath towel enclosing her body. She only calmed down when she saw her Lola outside and immediately tended to her. This is a story about my Lolo's old house. My Lolo's house stands in front of a school where a narrow road separates the two. According to the elders, this school was the site where previous Spanish families were settled and later on built into a school by the Americans. When the Japanese forces invaded the country, it became a military camp for them. For the houses in front of the school, including the house my Lolo owns, it became a confinement area for their prisoners of war. That time, I had no idea that place had that haunting history. I can't remember when my grandparents moved into the capital of Bacolod. All I can remember is that other than them, my parents and my siblings were always with me in the house. The spacious backyard was where I would always play alone, climbing trees to get guavas and cotton fruit, while my mother would sweep the yard and burn dried leaves. Papa would only be at the house during weekends, being a bus driver. I had two other siblings, but they were basically still infants that time. The house was always quiet. It's a little dark on the inside, even the rooms during the day. I remember it was always cloudy skies and rainfalls during the afternoons. During that time, my mother would just on her own and would only talk to us if we were to eat or need to take a bath. When I got a little older, that was when she started sharing stories to me about her experiences in the house. She would always see two elderlies, one woman and one man, who seemed to be a couple. There was even one instance where she saw them in a dream and warned her to leave the house, otherwise they will get one of her children. There was another dream that scared me more than anything else. In this dream, she said that she was in one of the rooms on the second floor. Then she heard someone playing the piano on the first floor. It was a gradual, saddening tone at first, but it was getting louder and violent as she was getting down the stairs. When she can finally see the piano below, she sees someone seated in front of the piano, but she cannot make anything out of its face. She then later saw my younger sister standing beside the man seated in the piano. When she woke up, she bursted in tears. I eventually took notice of the fact that my younger sister always had an illness of some sort. She would always be in the hospital for reasons unknown, sometimes taking her days to get discharged. It became evident to me why my parents would always call an albulario to perform cleansing around the house. There was this one time my father offered a sacrificial lamb, its blood and insides mixed into a pail and then splattered across the four corners of our house. There was also this tradition of gathering of our relatives during the new year. During this time, the old house would be left without anyone in it for a few days. There was this year when Nonong, one of our family's close friends, was left to tend the house while we were away. Evening of January 1, Nonong felt an urge to pee, so he decided to relieve himself. He was sleeping in the living room then and woke up antsy and went straight into the comfort room, which was some distance from where he was. He was walking with a lamp when upon passing the stairs, he saw two people eating at the table. It was two elderlies, one woman and one man. He could tell they were elderlies because of their white hair. He was already shivering, but decided to still go to the bathroom. After relieving himself, he wanted to go back to the living room. Since he still needs to pass by the dining area, he gathered himself so he wouldn't crumble. When he got there, he saw the same two elderlies still eating. He was slowly striding past the dining area, but when he noticed the woman was slowly lifting her head to look in his direction, he just sprinted out in fear and went home immediately. Her mother was just surprised to see Nonong go back to their house that night. He told my parents what happened that night and swore to never again sleep in that house. My mother's dream and what Nonong saw were the same being, two couple elderlies. A few years passed and my sister would eventually succumb to an illness we never knew what was. Otay, a known albulario in our province, told us that if we were to open our sister's coffin, we would only see a trunk of a tree. He said our sister's body was already taken into the other world by the two elderlies. After that, the house got even quieter. But the hauntings had ceased. Perhaps Otay was right. If only we listened to the spirits back then, my sister would still be alive right now. I was in my high school then. My father and I drove our eldest sister, using our 18-seater jeepney, off to UP Diliman. So, when we were on our way to her dormitory, we passed by those large trees, the feel of the wind flowing just music to our ears. After an hour, we bid farewell to my sister. My father drove off a different route. The area where the tree foliage was the densest, mostly composed of balete trees. It was already past 11 p.m., so I was a bit sleepy, so I lied beside my father in the driver's seat. Suddenly, my father held me on my thighs and his hands were shivering cold. He said, "Mer, look at the rearview mirror." To my surprise, I saw someone at the rear end of the jeepney, clamping to our vehicle from the outside. It was a huge man, its skin almost dark brownish and had a wood-like texture to them. I looked away from the mirror and nodded in fear, praying it wouldn't look back to us and go inside. Our speed almost went to a halt. It felt like the jeep was full of passengers and heavy cargo. So, my father stepped on the gas and throttled the jeepney like hell. After a while, it felt like the load went off and our jeepney started speeding down the road. We looked at each other, both fearing and laughing at the same time. To this day, I'm still thinking that would have happened if my father stopped the jeep, or had I slept at the back. Gives me the shivers just thinking about it. I was 5 years old then. My father died and my mom found the family in crisis, given the sudden death in the family. I can barely remember anything but my mom told us stories, and we needed money, so my mother had let his brother-in-law, my father's brother, and his wife rent half the house. Along with them was their maid, who was one cranky woman, especially when dealing with kids. My brother was barely 3 years old then, and we both would become the spanking subjects of her anger. My mother would sometimes catch her, but she wouldn't bother too much with it. One day, exactly 1 month after my father's death, we were outside the store, seated in front of the house's backyard. My uncle and his wife decided to stay at the house, together with their maid. Our house has a hallway, and from the door of the master's bedroom, you would pass by our room, the living room, the room rented by my uncle and his wife, and then the kitchen. So here goes. The maid was watching the TV that time, and she was well aware that we were all at the store outside the house. So she was confused why she was hearing footsteps in the master's bedroom, then disappeared. So she ignored it and said, "What the hell are you doing this time around?" thinking it was my younger brother. And so she stood up and went to the master's bedroom. When she took a peek inside, she was met with a chilling, cold gust of wind that permeated through her body. She then saw a figure wearing a white barong and black pants coming her way. She stood frozen and could barely contain her breath. The figure slowly took a stride along the hallway and into the kitchen, where it finally disappeared within the halls. The figure had no face, a little big-bodied, and his feet elevated the ground when it walked. The maid immediately sprinted towards the store and told us what happened. From the description, my mom immediately knew it was our father, judging from the description by the maid. From that point until they left our house, the maid would no longer hurt or scold us. She also made sure to never be alone in our house.